What's up, everybody? Justin here. I'm back with a new countdown video. Feels like it's been over a month since I've done a new countdown video. Here it is. Top 10 worst wrestlers in my opinion. The guys that didn't have much ability but somehow got in wrestling because of their looks or their bodies, or because they're giants. They didn't have much ability. I think all these guys sucked as wrestlers. They were no good. And some were not in wrestling very long. And some didn't even stick around that long. And none of these guys, except, like, let's see here, two guys, I would say two guys on this top 10 were major top stars for a little bit. So here we go. Number 10 in this top 10 worst wrestlers countdown. Top 10. Number 10 is Johnny Ace. I never was a fan of his. I saw his work as a wrestler in WCW in 89 and 90. I thought he's no good. Now, he wasn't as bad as some of these other guys, but he was no good, he was boring, he was not interesting. So that's why Johnny Ace is on this list of top 10 worst wrestlers. The guy was super boring. And I don't think he was ever anybody's favorite, ever. He did well, I guess. Had a good career in Japan, and I guess he did very well in Japan. I believe he was a pretty big star in Japan. Big deal. I don't care. Number 9 of top 10 worst wrestlers, number 9 is the Ultimate Warrior. The guy had a great character. The guy had a great gimmick. The guy looked a lot of times like he was juicing out of his mind. I mean, especially when he had those tassels tied around his biceps. The guy looked like he could have exploded. He was doing so many steroids. The guy abused steroids, in my opinion. He abused them in the 80s, especially in 1989 and even 88. The guy was huge and was definitely on roids. But this isn't about steroids. Again, as a wrestling fan, I don't care if wrestlers do steroids. I really don't care. This is about top 10 worst wrestlers. An Ultimate Warrior, if you're a fan of him, that's cool. I respect your opinion. If you're a friend of mine and you're a fan of him, that's okay. A lot of people were Warrior fans as kids and growing up. But I wasn't. I was always a Hogan fan over the Warrior. So number 9 is Ultimate Warrior. He was definitely not one of the worst wrestlers. He definitely was. Number 8. I almost said number 6. Number 8. Top 10 worst wrestlers. He wasn't a full-time wrestler ever. He wasn't known as a wrestler, but he still was pretty damn bad. That's why he's on this worst list of this countdown. Not list, but this countdown. The List is my other show I do, called The List. By the way, check that out. I have a big playlist of list shows. Check out my list playlist. Number 8, worst wrestlers. Number 8, this top 10, number 8 is Mr. Vince McMahon. Mr. McMahon. He was a bad wrestler. He couldn't do that much. He could take a lot of bumps. And crazy bumps, and he could bleed a lot. That's about it. All he could do is punch, which his punches looked weak, and his punches were not good looking. His kicks were not good, and he even tried to do clotheslines. Those didn't even look that good. But still, he took a lot of bumps. Vince McMahon, number 8. He was not a good wrestler. He was one of the worst. Number 7. Now, I like this guy. I was a fan of him when he was in ECW. I loved his gimmick. I loved it that they played Metallica's Enter Sandman throughout his entire entrance. I really enjoyed his entrance, and I enjoyed him. If you know who I'm talking about by now, well, you probably never watched ECW. The Sandman. He was definitely one of the worst wrestlers. He's even said in interviews, he knows he's not known as a good wrestler. I don't think he really cares. And that wasn't his gimmick anyways. His gimmick in ECW, he didn't have to be a good wrestler. I'm trying to defend him. I don't know why, but I feel like defending him. He wasn't a good wrestler. He never claimed to be, he never had to be. All he had to do was pick up this bat like it's a Singapore cane, but all he had to do was swing his Singapore cane and just bash people over the head with it. That's all he had to do. Get in the ring. He'd even go like this sometimes, and the fans would chant, "Fuck him up, Sandman, fuck him up." That was pretty funny. So anyways, all he had to do, his gimmick was get in the ring and crack people with his cane, drink a beer, and then leave. That's all he really had to do. Even though he did wrestle in matches for more than 10 minutes sometimes. But still, number 7, worst wrestlers, is the Sandman. Number 6 is the Great Khali. I could have moved Khali up. Great Khali could have been number 1, but he's not. And he's not number 1 because excuse me. He's not number 1 because I'm going to defend, or try to defend, Great Khali a little bit. The guy's one of the worst in the ring, but it wasn't really his fault because the guy was such a giant. The guy was so goddamn tall. It was hard for him to move around. It was hard for him to walk. It was hard for him to take bumps. I don't remember him barely ever taking bumps. And he wasn't good at wrestling. He wasn't good at taking bumps. But, again, the guy was a giant. So, I mean, he was a giant. So what did you expect? So number 6 is a Great Khali. He could have been number 1. But he's not number 1 because, I'm going to say because he's a giant. And that wasn't his fault. Number 5. I need a drink here. Got some crap in my throat. Number 5. Another giant. Wasn't his fault he's a giant. Wasn't his fault. He was hired and probably given a big contract by Ted Turner because he was a giant. Who am I talking about? El Gigante, or the Giant Gonzalez in WWF. He was one of the worst wrestlers I've ever seen. He might be worse than, he is worse than Khali. That's why El Gigante, Giant Gonzalez, is number 5, because he is worse than Great Khali. The guy couldn't do anything really. All he could really do is body slam people and put a claw on them. And that was it. He couldn't take any bumps. He looked awkward in the ring. I felt sorry for the guy because he couldn't take any bumps. Anyways, number 5, El Gigante and the Giant Gonzalez, they were the same people. If you didn't know that, they were the same guy. Not same people, but he was the same person playing those two characters. Number 4, I don't like this guy. That's probably why he's on this list. And I thought he's a pretty lousy wrestler. I thought he's no good. Number 4 of this top 10 worst wrestlers, number 4 is Hugh Morris. Hugh Morris. Bill DeMott. Whatever you want to call him. I didn't like the guy. As a wrestler, I was never a fan of his. I didn't even like it when he was a babyface. And he was General Rection, and he was getting a push. I didn't even like that. So number 4, again, number 4 is Hugh Morris. You really sucked, in my opinion, as a wrestler. And I don't think you had that many fans. Number 3 now. a guy that is known for brawling, hardcore wrestling. And this guy's no better than the Sandman. Really, he's no better than the Sandman. Number 3 is Nasty Boy Brian Knobbs. Nasty Boy Brian Knobbs. He was no good. He sucked as a wrestler. I don't know if he's an amateur wrestler. I don't care. But as a pro wrestler, his career went in the direction of being a brawler. A street fighter, brawler, hardcore wrestler, whatever you want to call it. That's where his career went. Good for him. I'm happy for him that he made a lot of money. And he was a tag team champion in WCW and WWF, so he did have some success. Actually, the Nasty Boys, as a tag team in WCW, they had a pretty good run for like 3 years or 2 years. So number 3 is Nasty Boy Brian Knobbs. His partner, Sags, Jerry Sags, he wasn't much better, but he's not on this countdown. Number 2 of the worst wrestlers on this top 10. Number 2 is Lex Luger. Never cared for him. Never was a fan of him. I think he really sucked as a wrestler. He sold okay. He was kind of an okay seller. But he just sucked as a wrestler. He couldn't do much except power moves. His best moves were probably clothesline, power slam, and a gorilla press slam. That's all he could do that was okay. And I just thought Lex Luger was a pretty damn awful wrestler. That's why he's number 2 on this top 10 worst wrestlers. Number 1, I believe he's worse than Great Khali and everybody else on this countdown. Number 1 is David Flair. One of the worst wrestlers I've ever seen. And I'll tell you why. Because Great Khali and Elegante and everybody else, they didn't have a Ric Flair, the Nature Boy, as their father. David Flair, your father was Ric freaking Flair. Your father was the kiss-stealing, wheeling-dealing, limousine-riding, jet-flying son of a gun, and you had zero talent. You didn't take any talent. I don't know what happened with your genes, and if some other guy's your father and Ric Flair's not your real father, I don't know. I'm sure he's his real father. I'm just making a joke. But, again, David Flair, Ric Flair was your father. Didn't you ever watch his matches and study his matches? If you wanted to wrestle, why didn't you pick it up? Why didn't you pick up being a wrestler more? Why didn't you pick it up better? It should have been natural to you, being the son of Ric Flair, but it wasn't. You were one of the worst wrestlers. I didn't hate David Flair. I never hated him. When he's in WCW, I thought his character sucked, and I never, ever was entertained by him. So number 1, the worst wrestler, number 1 is David Flair. Probably because your father was Ric Flair, and you didn't have 1% of talent that your father had. So that's pretty pathetic. This ends my countdown of the top 10 worst wrestlers. Hope you enjoyed it. Follow me on Twitter at WWENXT Guy. Also, like, comment, share, and subscribe. On Tuesday or Wednesday, if I'm not busy, I will do more countdown shows. Let me see what this one is I've written down here. Countdown of the top 20, my top 20 favorite TV shows growing up and as an adult. I'll do that countdown this week also. I'll do my top 10, another countdown of top 10 worst pushes in wrestling of guys that I think didn't deserve it and should have never been pushed as hard as they were. Hope you enjoyed this countdown, top 10 worst wrestlers in my opinion. If you have your own top 10 worst wrestlers, comment under this video and tell me your top 10 worst wrestlers in your opinion. I would like to hear it. Again, follow me on Twitter. And like, comment, share, and subscribe. Have a great week, everybody. Bye for now.